Imagine being in a room full of people, feeling your chest tightening more and more. Your breath becomes shallow, your palms sweat, and your mind races with thoughts that seem impossible to quiet. For many of us, this feeling isn't just an occasional discomfort, it's a constant companion that follows us throughout our days and nights. Particularly, what if I told you that one of the biggest mistakes many older adults make isn't acknowledging their financial troubles or health concern, but rather ignoring the anxiety that has quietly shaped their lives for decades? The story I'm about to share might sound familiar to some of you, and for others, it might be the wake-up call you never knew you needed. This is about Jane, who at 75 years old, finally decided to address the anxiety she had been carrying like a shadow for most of her life. Her journey reveals something profound. It's never too late to reclaim your peace of mind, but the years spent in silence exact a toll that none of us should have to pay. The habits of avoidance, the physical symptoms mistaken for just getting older, the relationships affected by fears that were never expressed. All of these represent lost opportunities for a fuller life. Today we're going to explore why so many of us in our golden years have normalized living with chronic anxiety, how this invisible burden affects our health and happiness in ways we might not even recognize, and most importantly, the transformative power of finally addressing what we've been taught to endure in silence. Whether you're in your 60s, 70s, or beyond, or if you love someone who is, this conversation could change how you view the natural right to peace of mind at every stage of life. Because the truth is, anxiety doesn't have to be the unwelcome companion of aging, and recognizing this truth can open the door to the serene later years we all deserve. Thank you so much for joining me today on this important journey of understanding. If you've stayed with me through that introduction, I know that something in those words must have resonated with, and for that, I'm truly grateful. There's something powerful about acknowledging together that anxiety isn't just a young person's issue. It affects people of all ages, and sometimes its grip can tighten as we move into our later. I want you to know that this space we're creating together is one of complete acceptance and understanding. Many of us were raised in generations where discussing mental health was simply not done. Feelings were meant to be managed privately, and showing emotional struggle was often viewed as a sign of weakness. Today, we're gently challenging those old beliefs. Your presence here is already an act of courage, whether you're seeking understanding for yourself or for someone you care about. Before we dive deeper, I want to acknowledge that recognizing anxiety in ourselves or our loved ones can bring up complex emotions, perhaps relief at naming something that has been present for so long, or perhaps some sadness about the time spent struggling silently. All of these reactions are completely valid. What matters most is that you're here now, taking this step toward greater awareness and potentially greater peace. The insights I'm about to share come from both research and the real experiences of people who have discovered that addressing anxiety later in life can bring unexpected joy and freedom. So thank you for being brave enough to be here, for being open to new perspectives, and for considering the possibility that even long-standing patterns can change when we bring them into the light with compassion. What we're exploring today touches on something that has remained in the shadows for too long: the unique experience of anxiety in our later years, particularly after 65. This isn't just another generic discussion about anxiety that you might find elsewhere. Instead, we're focusing specifically on how anxiety manifests differently as we age, why it often goes unrecognized by healthcare providers, and most importantly, why addressing it, even after decades of coping and carrying on, can profoundly improve our quality of life. The topic we're discussing is deeply personal for many. You might be someone who has silently managed worry and fear for years, perhaps thinking it was just part of your personality or a natural consequence of aging. Or you might be concerned about a parent, partner, or friend whose anxiety seems to be increasing with age, affecting their ability to enjoy life fully. What makes this conversation different is our focus on the specific intersection of anxiety and aging, a topic that receives far too little attention in both medical settings and public discourse. We'll be exploring not just the emotional aspects of anxiety, but also how it can manifest physically in ways that are often mistaken for other age-related conditions. Throughout our time together, I want to emphasize that while anxiety may be common as we age, it is never simply a normal part of aging that we must accept. The belief that nervousness, worry, and fear are inevitable companions of our later years is not only incorrect, but potentially harmful, as it prevents many from seeking the relief and support they deserve. So as we continue, I invite you to approach this topic with an open heart and mind, considering how the insights shared might apply to your own life or the lives of those you care about. I'd like to take a moment to outline the key points we'll be covering today, as understanding the full scope of how anxiety affects older adults requires looking at several interconnected aspects. First, we'll explore the surprising prevalence of anxiety among older adults, with statistics showing that while it affects up to 20% of people over 65, it is diagnosed and treated in less than 1/3 of those cases. This underdiagnosis happens for several critical reasons we'll examine closely. We'll then look at how anxiety uniquely manifests in older adults, often appearing as physical complaints rather than obvious worry. Symptoms like digestive issues, sleep disturbances, and even cognitive changes that are frequently attributed simply to getting older rather than recognized as anxiety. This misattribution is one of the most significant barriers to proper care. Next, we'll discuss the serious consequences of untreated anxiety in later life, including its impact on physical health, cognitive function, and overall independence. Research has shown that chronic anxiety actually accelerates aging at the cellular level and increases vulnerability to conditions like heart disease, diabetes, and even dementia, making it far more than just an emotional concern. We'll then explore the complex relationship between life transitions common in older adulthood, retirement, loss of loved ones, changes in health status, and increased anxiety, understanding how these major life shifts can trigger or exacerbate anxiety, even in people who never experienced it earlier in life. Particularly important is our discussion of the generational factors that often prevent older adults from acknowledging or seeking help for anxiety. Many of today's seniors grew up in eras where psychological struggles were stigmatized or viewed as character flaws, leading to decades of silence and self-reliance even when suffering. We'll also examine how anxiety often masquerades as irritability, resistance to new experiences, or seemingly irrational worries about safety in older adults, causing misunderstandings in families where these behaviors may be labeled as simply being difficult, rather than recognized as manifestations of anxiety. Finally, we'll share the encouraging research showing that anxiety responds extremely well to treatment at any age, with studies indicating that older adults often experience significant improvement with proper intervention, sometimes even more quickly than younger populations. Throughout our discussion, we'll weave in stories of real people who discovered freedom from anxiety in their 60s, 70s, and beyond, demonstrating that it's truly never too late to experience relief and rediscover joy. Now, let's delve deeper into understanding anxiety in later life and why it so often goes unaddressed for decades. One of the most crucial insights from research on aging and mental health is that anxiety in older adults frequently looks different than it does in younger people. While a younger person might recognize their racing thoughts, excessive worry, and feelings of dread as anxiety, older adults often experience and report primarily physical symptoms. Persistent digestive problems, unexplained pain, dizziness, heart palpitations, trembling, headaches, and fatigue are commonly the primary complaints, with the emotional components of anxiety either not recognized or not reported. This physical manifestation creates the first major barrier to diagnosis, as both patients and doctors focus on treating these physical symptoms without addressing their root cause. Adding to this challenge is the significant overlap between symptoms of anxiety and common age-related conditions. For example, memory problems that might be attributed to early dementia could actually stem from anxiety, which is known to impair concentration and memory function. Similarly, sleep disturbances, appetite changes, and fatigue might be considered normal aging when they actually reflect untreated anxiety. This misattribution means many older adults undergo extensive testing and treatment for various physical conditions while their anxiety remains unaddressed. The generational context cannot be overstated in understanding this pattern of underdiagnosis. Most of today's older adults were raised in eras where psychological struggles carried significant stigma. They were taught to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, to not make a fuss, and to view emotional difficulties as character weaknesses rather than health conditions requiring care. This cultural background creates profound reluctance to discuss anxiety symptoms with healthcare providers, particularly if those providers don't specifically ask about mental health concerns. Healthcare systems themselves contribute to the problem. The average primary care visit lasts less than 20 minutes, with multiple physical health concerns to address. Mental health screening often falls to the bottom of the priority list, especially when patients don't volunteer emotional symptoms. Additionally, symptoms of anxiety in older adults are frequently misinterpreted even by healthcare professionals as signs of cognitive decline or simply attributed to personality. This is particularly true for certain manifestations of anxiety such as hoarding behaviors, repetitive worrying about safety, or resistance to change, which may be dismissed as simply how they've always been, rather than recognized as treatable anxiety symptoms. Perhaps most concerning is the normalization of anxiety by older adults themselves. After decades of living with anxiety, many have come to believe that constant worry, fear of specific situations, or general nervousness is simply part of their personality rather than a treatable condition. They may have developed elaborate coping mechanisms, avoiding certain situations, relying on family members to handle anxiety-provoking tasks, or using alcohol or over-the-counter medications to manage symptoms that mask the full impact of anxiety on their lives. This normalization means many never even consider that life could be different, that the weight they've carried for so long could be lifted. The cost of this unrecognized anxiety is immense. Beyond the daily suffering it causes, research has linked chronic anxiety to accelerated biological aging, increased inflammation, compromised immune function, and greater vulnerability to age-related diseases. It restricts activities, reduces social engagement, strains relationships, and significantly diminishes quality of life during years that could otherwise be characterized by meaning, connection, and joy. I need to pause here and ask you something important. What time of day does anxiety usually hit you the hardest? You know, each person feels anxiety uniquely, and sharing this experience can be the first step to understanding it better. I know you may have never talked about this with anyone. Maybe you think no one would understand, or that your feelings aren't important, but I want you to know that here, in this space, your experience matters deeply. Leave us a comment below completing the sentence. My anxiety usually appears when your courage in sharing might be exactly what another person needs to read today to feel less alone. And in upcoming videos, we'll address specifically those moments you share. This is a community of mutual support, where every word of yours is welcomed with respect and understanding. Something remarkable happens when we begin to name our experiences. They become less overwhelming, less defining, and when we discover that others share similar struggles, the isolation that so often accompanies anxiety begins to dissolve. I've seen incredible connections form in the comments section of these videos, where someone shares their experience and others respond with understanding and solidarity. These connections remind us that while anxiety may be part of our story, it doesn't have to be the whole story. And sometimes, simply knowing we're not alone in our experience can be the first step toward healing. So please, take a moment to share your experience. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And know that I read every comment, taking note of the patterns and specific concerns you share, so that I can address them in future videos. This community grows stronger with every honest share, with every moment of vulnerability. And together, we're challenging the silence that has surrounded anxiety in older adults for far too long. Now that we've explored how anxiety manifests and why it often goes unrecognized, let's focus on practical approaches that have helped thousands of older adults find relief, even after decades of struggling. First and foremost, it's important to understand that anxiety responds extremely well to treatment at any age. Research consistently shows that older adults often experience significant improvement with proper intervention, sometimes even more quickly than younger people. This is encouraging news that challenges the misconception that long-standing anxiety becomes hardwired and unchangeable. One of the most effective approaches for addressing anxiety in later life is cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which has been specifically adapted for older adults. This approach helps identify and change thought patterns that fuel anxiety, teaching practical skills for managing worrying thoughts and physical symptoms. Studies show that older adults who engage in just 8 to 12 sessions of CBT often experience substantial reduction in anxiety symptoms, with benefits continuing long after the therapy ends. Importantly, these improvements occur regardless of how long the person has experienced anxiety. For those who prefer not to or cannot access therapy, structured self-help approaches based on CBT principles have also shown remarkable effectiveness. These might include workbooks, online programs, or guided practices that teach similar skills for recognizing and challenging anxious thoughts and managing physical symptoms of anxiety. Mindfulness practices have shown particular promise for older adults with anxiety. These practices, which involve gentle attention to the present moment without judgment, help create distance from worrying thoughts and reduce the physical stress response. Research shows that regular mindfulness practice actually creates measurable changes in brain regions involved in anxiety, even in older adults who have never meditated before. Many find that starting with just 5 minutes of guided mindfulness practice daily leads to noticeable improvement in their sense of calm and control. Physical movement is another powerful tool for managing anxiety at any age. Activities that combine gentle movement with mindfulness, such as Tai Chi, yoga, or simple walking meditation, have been shown to significantly reduce anxiety symptoms in older adults. These practices work by engaging the body's relaxation response, reducing stress hormones, and providing a healthy outlet for the physical energy that anxiety creates. The key is finding movement that feels accessible and enjoyable rather than another source of stress. Social connection deserves special mention as both a preventive factor and treatment component for anxiety in later life. Research consistently shows that meaningful social engagement protects against anxiety and enhances recovery. This doesn't necessarily mean large social gathering, which might actually increase anxiety for some. Rather, It means having regular, authentic connections with others, where one feels seen and understood. For many older adults who have long struggled with anxiety, simply joining a group where they can share their experiences with others who understand can be transformative. The normalization that occurs when discovering others have similar experiences often provides significant relief from the shame and isolation that frequently accompany long-standing anxiety. While medication is sometimes presented as the first or only option for anxiety, it's important to understand that non-medication approaches are often equally or more effective for older adults, without the risks of side effects or drug interactions that increase with age. That said, for some older adults, appropriate medication prescribed by a geriatric specialist can be an important part of treatment, particularly in the short term while developing new coping skills. Lifestyle factors play a crucial role in managing anxiety as well. Regular sleep routines, balanced nutrition that stabilizes blood sugar, moderate caffeine and alcohol consumption, and exposure to natural light all contribute significantly to anxiety management. Many older adults find that simply addressing sleep problems leads to substantial improvement in anxiety symptoms. Let's explore some of the specific aspects of anxiety that are particularly relevant to older adults, as these nuances are rarely discussed, yet critically important for understanding this experience. One of the most common but least recognized forms of anxiety in later life is health anxiety, which involves excessive worry about developing serious illnesses or misinterpreting normal bodily sensations as signs of disease. This form of anxiety is particularly challenging because aging does bring legitimate health concerns, making it difficult to distinguish between appropriate health vigilance and anxiety-driven preoccupation. What often happens is a cycle where normal age-related changes or minor symptoms trigger anxiety, which then creates additional physical symptoms, like increased heart rate, muscle tension, or digestive disturbances, which are then interpreted as further evidence of serious illness, increasing anxiety further. Breaking this cycle requires developing the ability to respond to bodily sensations with curious awareness, rather than immediate fear, a skill that can be developed at any age with proper guidance. Financial anxiety represents another common concern, particularly for those living on fixed incomes in times of economic uncertainty. This anxiety often manifests as excessive frugality that goes beyond practical budgeting to actually diminish quality of life, persistent worry about becoming a burden to family members, or catastrophic thinking about financial security regardless of actual financial status. For many older adults, these financial fears connect to deep-seated values around independence and self-sufficiency, making them particularly distressing. Loss-related anxiety also takes unique forms in later life. Beyond the natural grief that accompanies losing loved ones, many older adults experience anticipatory anxiety about future losses, of additional loved ones, of their own abilities, or of their independence. This forward-looking worry can cast a shadow over present moments, preventing full engagement with and enjoyment of current relationships and activities. It may express itself as reluctance to form new relationships for fear of inevitable loss, or hesitation to engage in activities that bring joy due to awareness of their finite nature. Technology-related anxiety has emerged as a significant issue for many older adults, particularly as essential services increasingly move online. This isn't simply about preferring traditional methods. For many, interacting with rapidly changing technology triggers genuine anxiety responses, including physical symptoms and avoidance behavior. This anxiety can lead to increasing isolation, as participation in many aspects of modern life, from banking to healthcare to social connection, requires technological engagement. Sleep anxiety deserves special mention, as it affects a substantial proportion of older adults. This involves excessive worry about not getting enough sleep and the consequences of sleep deprivation, which paradoxically makes falling and staying asleep more difficult. The relationship between anxiety and sleep disturbance is bidirectional. Anxiety disrupts sleep, and poor sleep exacerbates anxiety, creating a challenging cycle that requires intervention, addressing both components simultaneously. Social anxiety in later life often differs from its presentation in younger adults. Rather than focusing primarily on fear of judgment or embarrassment, older adults with social anxiety may worry more about being a burden, having physical needs in social settings, such as needing to use the bathroom frequently or having hearing difficulties, or not being able to contribute meaningfully to conversation. This anxiety can lead to declining social invitations and progressive isolation at a life stage when social connection is particularly important. For some older adults, anxiety focuses specifically on cognitive functioning. Every instance of forgetfulness or word-finding difficulty becomes catastrophically interpreted as evidence of dementia, creating significant distress. This anxiety itself can actually impair cognitive function, as anxiety consumes cognitive resources that would otherwise be available for memory and processing. creating a self-fulfilling prophecy effect that can be mistaken for actual cognitive decline. The most important insight I want to share today, the revelation that has transformed thousands of lives, is this. The anxiety you or your loved one has carried for decades is not an immutable part of who you are. It is not simply a personality trait that must be accepted, nor is it an inevitable consequence of aging. It is a health condition that responds to proper care, and relief is possible at any age. This truth contradicts messages that many older adults have internalized throughout their lives. That they should simply cope with emotional distress privately, that they shouldn't expect joy and peace in their later years, or that long-standing anxiety becomes permanent and unchangeable. The science is clear and hopeful. The brain remains capable of change throughout life, and anxiety patterns that have persisted for 30, 40, or even 50 years can shift with proper support and approach. Perhaps even more compelling than the research are the countless stories of transformation. The 78-year-old who had avoided travel her entire adult life due to panic attacks, who now explores new countries with her grandchildren. The 82-year-old who had suffered from insomnia driven by nighttime worry for as long as he could remember, who now sleeps soundly through the night. The 69-year-old who had structured her entire life around avoiding anxiety triggers, who now engages fully in activities she once feared. These aren't rare exceptions. They represent the typical experience of older adults who finally receive proper support for anxiety. The tragedy is not that so many have suffered from anxiety into their later years. The tragedy is that so many believe this suffering was necessary and unavoidable. If you recognize yourself or someone you love in what we've discussed today, the most important step is to break the silence. Name the anxiety, whether to yourself, to a trusted loved one, or to a healthcare provider. This simple act of acknowledgement begins to shift anxiety from an all-encompassing, unexamined force to a specific experience that can be addressed. Next, seek knowledge and support. This might mean talking with a healthcare provider who is knowledgeable about mental health in older adults, finding a therapist experienced in working with anxiety in later life, joining a support group where you can connect with others with similar experiences, or exploring reputable self-help resources developed specifically for anxiety. The key is to recognize that you deserve support and that effective help is available. Remember that addressing anxiety isn't about erasing all worry in your life or never feeling nervous again. It's about developing a new relationship with anxious thoughts and feeling, one where they no longer control your choices or diminish your joy. It's about expanding your life rather than continuing to accommodate anxiety by making your world smaller. Let me share some additional perspective to be helpful as you consider the insights we've explored. First, it's worth noting that while we've focused on anxiety that has been present for many years, late-onset anxiety, anxiety that appears for the first time in later life, is also common and equally deserving of attention. This often emerges in response to significant life changes like retirement, health challenges, or loss of loved ones, and may be mistaken for a normal adjustment reaction when it actually represents a treatable anxiety condition. Second, it's important to understand that anxiety often coexists with depression in older adults, with each condition potentially exacerbating the other. If you're experiencing persistent sadness, loss of interest in activities you once enjoyed, feelings of worthlessness, or thoughts of death alongside anxiety symptoms, be sure to mention all of these experiences when seeking help, as the most effective treatment approaches may address both conditions. For families, supporting older adults with anxiety, patience, and empathy are essential. Remember that behaviors that might seem frustrating, irrational, or resistant, like repeatedly seeking reassurance, avoiding new experiences, or seeming overly concerned with routine, may actually be manifestations of anxiety rather than deliberate choices or personality. Approaching these behaviors with compassion rather than frustration can open the door to more productive conversations about the underlying anxiety. It's also worth emphasizing that while professional support is invaluable, small daily practices can make a significant difference in managing anxiety. These might include scheduled worry time, containing worry to a specific time of day rather than allowing it to permeate all waking hours, brief relaxation practices integrated throughout the day, or simply noticing and gently challenging catastrophic thoughts when they arise. The cumulative effect of these small practices can be substantial over time. Finally, for those who have organized much of their lives around managing anxiety, perhaps limiting activities, relying heavily on others for support in anxiety-provoking situations, or using alcohol or other substances to blunt anxious feelings, be patient with yourself as you begin to make changes. Patterns established over decades take time to shift, and the process may involve temporary increases in anxiety as you begin to approach rather than avoid feared situations. This discomfort is a normal part of the healing process, not a sign that anxiety is immutable or that treatment isn't working. If you identified with what we talked about today, and you're looking for natural ways to calm your mind and live with more peace, our channel is a safe space created especially for you. Each week, we share simple and effective techniques that have helped thousands of people recover their inner peace. We're together on this journey, and every step you take toward wellness matters. Click the subscribe button below and activate notifications to receive our videos as soon as they're published. Remember, you don't need to face anxiety alone, and small changes can make a big difference in your quality of life. I created this channel because I believe deeply that peace of mind is not a luxury. It's a basic human need that becomes no less important as we age. In fact, our later years should be a time of emotional well-being and contentment, freed from the unnecessary burden of untreated anxiety. Each week, we explore different aspects of emotional wellness for older adults, from specific techniques for managing anxious thoughts to ways of building resilience in the face of life's challenges. We share stories of transformation that remind us what's possible, practical tools that can be integrated into daily life, and the latest research translated into accessible, actionable insights. This community has become a place where thousands have found not only information, but also understanding and hope. Many have shared that simply knowing they're not alone in their experience has been the first step toward positive change. So, if what we've discussed today resonates with your experience or the experience of someone you care about, I invite you to join our community. Together, we're challenging the myth that anxiety is simply part of aging or an unchangeable personality trait, and discovering the freedom that comes with finally addressing what many have endured in silence for too long. Before we end our time together today, I want to encourage you to take one small step based on what we've discussed. This could be as simple as paying attention to when anxiety tends to arise for you and what triggers it, starting a brief daily mindfulness practice, or having a conversation with a trusted person about your experience. Remember that transformation begins with these small steps, not with dramatic overnight changes. If you found value in today's discussion, please help us extend this conversation to others who might benefit by liking this video, sharing it with someone who might find it helpful, or leaving a comment about your own experience or insight. Your engagement not only helps others find this resource, but also contributes to breaking the silence around anxiety in later life. And if you haven't already, subscribing to our channel ensures you won't miss future videos on related topics, including more specific strategies for managing different types of anxiety, ways to build emotional resilience as we age, and stories of transformation that remind us what's possible. The comment section below becomes a valuable resource in itself, as people share their experiences, what's helped them, and questions that might benefit others with similar concern. I read every comment and use your feedback to shape future content, addressing the specific challenges and questions that matter most to this community. Thank you for your attention, your openness, and your willingness to consider new perspectives on a topic that affects so many yet is discussed by so few. Whether you're personally affected by anxiety or supporting someone who is, your engagement with this conversation is an important step toward a culture that better recognizes and addresses the emotional health needs of older adults. I want to leave you with a thought that has been a guiding light for many who have finally addressed anxiety after decades of struggling. It's never too late to experience peace. The human capacity for change and growth doesn't diminish with age. In many ways, our later years offer unique opportunities for emotional healing and development as we bring the wisdom of experience to challenges we may have faced throughout our lives. Whatever path you choose from here, whether seeking professional support, exploring self-help resources, joining a supportive community, or simply beginning to pay more compassionate attention to your own experience, know that you're taking a step toward the peace and well-being that is your birthright at every age. The anxiety that may have been a companion for decades doesn't have to accompany you through the rest of your life journey. Change is possible, relief is attainable, and a different experience awaits when anxiety is finally addressed, rather than simply endured. Until next time, be gentle with yourself, celebrate each small step toward greater peace, and remember that it's never too late to experience the joy and serenity that come with freedom from anxiety's grip. Thank you for being part of this important conversation. I look forward to continuing our journey together in future videos, exploring more aspects of emotional wellness in our later years, and discovering together the freedom that comes with finally addressing what many have carried alone for far too long. Wishing you peace, courage, and well-being on your journey.